What's up, everybody, and welcome to the 24/7 Sports Channel. You're watching the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and I'm going to have Isaac Trotter join me momentarily as we continue with our preseason previews. But before we get there, make sure you like, share, and subscribe here on the 24/7 Sports Channel. Tell everybody what we're doing. Now, for those of you who haven't watched these preseason shows, this is now our fourth, and you are not going to see a lot of fluff. We are talking ball. We are talking hoop. We are getting right into it. As for the storyline, some of those other narratives, who's getting hired, who's getting fired, I don't care. I just want to know what's happening between the lines. So with that, we'll bring in my co-star here, Isaac Trotter. Trotter, I got to tell you, whenever I'm talking ball with you, it's like I'm cramming for a test. I've spent all day just like going through stats and making sure Trotter wasn't going to like one-up me with his Ken Pom, whatever stuff. So I'm ready. I'm ready for you. As we've done through the first three, you tier these teams. Your top tier are the national championship contenders. Drum roll, please. The national championship contenders for Isaac Trotter in the Big Ten Conference are, Trotter?
None.
Tell you what, I don't mean to be a hater, but that is kind of consistent with what we've seen. The last Big Ten team to win a national championship was Michigan State 25 years ago. Trotter, real quickly, break it down for me why you don't think anybody in this league is national championship worthy at this point.
Well, there's a few teams that I think have a chance to potentially get there. But when we look at the national title contenders, you're kind of looking for those All-Americans that really crushed in retention and crushed in the portal. There's a lot of guys that left this Big Ten. There's a lot of star power that's exited from this Big Ten. There is no Zach Edey. There is no Terrence Shannon, those like first team best five players in college basketball type of players. So this Big Ten is as wide open as any. We have 18 teams. All 18 are top 75 on Ken Pom. So this is as flat of a league as ever, but I don't know if I see that tier one national title contender. There are a couple teams, though, and we'll get into them, where they have some young dudes that if they're right, like they'll be in this conversation.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like there's not going to be a bad game in the Big Ten this year. But let's get right into it. Like I said, no fluff, all ball. Tier two, these are top 25 caliber rosters, and you've got 7 of them: UCLA, Purdue, Indiana, Oregon, Illinois, Rutgers, and Michigan. Let's start with UCLA, Mick Cronin's squad. You've got them atop this tier 2 projected starting lineup. And I've got some issue with this. I'm going to be honest. Dylan Andrews, Sky Clark, Kobe Johnson, Tyler Bilodeau, William Kyle III. So, Trotter, my question to you from the start, where is Sebastian Mack in your projected starting lineup?
Yeah, just one issue with Sebastian Mack was just his inefficiency last year, especially from 3. A little bit redundant with what Dylan Andrews wants to do in the middle of the floor. So I think he makes a little bit more sense coming off the bench. But again, if you're talking yourself into UCLA this year, it is their depth, because there's going to be times where Sebastian Mack has to be the alpha of this team. Then you have Lazar Stefanovic, who could come off the bench. Eric Daly Jr., a former McDonald's All-American, who could come off the bench. Trent Perry, a recruit that we're all really high on, potentially coming off the bench. But this group is built on defense. Kobe Johnson, the transfer out of USC, is the best perimeter defender in the Big Ten. I think he is a front runner for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm really bullish on Dylan Andrews taking that next step here in year 3. We've seen development be very linear in this program under point guards. And now he has a pick and pop big man in that front court and Tyler Bilodeau to play with. So I'm bullish on Dylan Andrews figuring it out, and just this overall depth, and a bet on Mick Cronin, the coach, with a roster that's a lot more older and veteran, figuring out and being the best team in the Big Ten. Although if you want to argue it with me, I honestly have no pushback.
Yeah, I'll tell you what my concerns are. And that's first and foremost, it's kind of interior finishing and rebounding. I think they had a not so secret scrimmage with San Diego State that illustrated some of that stuff. I think San Diego State, just going off the box score, which isn't fair, they appear to be playing to win from a rotational standpoint. Mick Cronin played 11 guys, 11 minutes or more. So he was obviously toying with the lineups, but those are the concerns to me, the interior. And then this is going to be a common theme. You're going to hear me say this. I wonder about the collective shooting and the implications on floor spacing. One of the reasons why I'm a little higher on some of the teams in this league than you are at this point is because I'm betting on offense. UCLA certainly, I think, will be one of the better defensive teams in this league. They've been top 50 in the country the last 4 years, and that includes last year when they were young and incorporating 4 different international players into the rotation. Mick Cronin, as good as it gets on the defensive end of the floor. All right, second, Purdue, coming off last year's national championship game. Obviously, Zach Edey is gone, but they return 3 starters, including the preseason player of the year in the Big Ten in Braden Smith. Trotter, tell me why they're not number one in your book. Let's start there.
I think that losing Zach Edey is obviously a huge loss. And one thing I'm interested in is his screening. He really turned this pick and roll offense into an elite unit because he was able to scrape so many defenders off of it. So I have a little bit of concern about Purdue's long-term like superstar upside, but I think they have maybe the highest floor of any team in the Big Ten, because when you get 2 year 3 starters back in Fletcher Loyer and Braden Smith, no one else can have that really in an era where there's changes galore. Purdue's retention is key. But it's really going to come down to their breakout candidates on the wing, whether Miles Colvin or Cam Heide. Both guys have shown little flashes that we really like, but they have to put it together and be real dudes all year. I think Trey Kaufman-Wren's going to be really, really productive inside, but that screening that they're losing from Zach Edey and his offensive rebounding and his rim rate offensively and defensively, all of that stuff really, really matters. And I think he had a plus 32 net rating when he was on the floor last year. Replacing someone like that isn't super easy. So I think Purdue will still be good. I'm not sure they have that great tier, that killer tier that they had last year.
All right, couple points for me. I'm expecting a breakout season from Trey Kaufman-Wren. When you talk to coaches in that league, one of the things they said consistently, even as far as a year ago, was, hey, this guy's an NBA prospect. There's just not necessarily the spacing on the floor with Edey for him to show it. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do in this role this year. I love Miles Colvin. I have since high school. I think he's got star potential. I think he may be the most naturally talented long-term prospect on this Purdue roster, and that is no disrespect to that backcourt, especially Braden Smith. I thought it was really interesting to hear Matt Painter say at the media day, hey, we ran a lot of ball screens last year. We just ran ball screens into post-ups. We're going to run ball screens as the primary action this year, and we're going to see exactly what Braden Smith can do. So I think the entire league is very curious to see how that will go. All right, let's keep it moving here. Your third team is Indiana, and obviously, speaking of spacing, that is going to be the theme here, but there is no denying the sheer talent, bringing back guys like Malik Reneau and Mackenzie Mgbako, and then going big in the portal with Umar Ballo and others. Trotter, what do you like most about this team that you've got them in the top 3?
Their pick and roll offense last year was atrocious. Miles Rice is one of the best pick and roll scorers in the country. Their offensive and defensive rebounding last year was atrocious. Umar Ballo was one of the top rebounders in the portal. So I think those two areas of the floor are going to really raise the floor for this group. But it comes down to Mike Woodson and his ability to adjust. I think not just adjust offensively with his spacing and getting Luke Goody on the floor, getting Mgbako down at playing him potentially down at the floor and getting, a Bryson Tucker or Cannon Carlisle on the floor with these guards, but also defensively. Indiana helped at the nail a ton. That gave up a ton of threes. If we've learned anything from some of these most successful defenses in the sport, a lot of them are either trying to take the ball away or limit 3-point field goal attempts. Indiana did neither last year. So I think finding a way to do one of those things really, really well will help. I think this group is really good and they can be special and go into that tier 1 national title contender if Miles Rice is that dude. He beat cancer. He beats guys off the ball, off the bounce as well. I think he is, one of the breakout players in the Big Ten this year.
Hard not to root for that guy, but I will say, and I know everybody talks about Indiana and the shot selection and the lack of 3-pointers and 3-point defense. The roster construction gives me pause. Umar Ballo is a 5, in my opinion. Malik Reneau is a 5. Mackenzie Mgbako is a 4. I've always thought that was his best position dating back to high school. So you're starting 5-5-4 along the front line. And then as good as Miles Rice is, the Achilles heel was at the 3-point line, 27%. Trey Galloway, another guy, 26% from the 3-point line last year. So there is going to be a really big questions about spacing. Cannon Carlisle, who you mentioned, I think is one of the more swing players on this roster, because if he is at his best, it really opens things up. His variability last year at Stanford was just crazy. I mean, he had some games where you could barely tell he was on the floor. He had other games where he's dropping 31. If you can get a consistent version of him to space the floor to give you another perimeter threat, I think that could go a long way towards determining just how good this Indiana team can be. All right, keep it moving here. Oregon, a team that when we did our preseason favorite episode about a month ago, I chose them as the team that I like as a potential favorite in their first year in the Big Ten. I love Jackson Shellstat. I think he's got a chance to emerge into a star. KJ Evans coming back as a returning starter. Nate Biddle is finally healthy. And then the additions of TJ Bamba and Brandon Angel give them some necessary floor spacing and then someone to take the pressure off Shellstad. I love this roster. I'm a little concerned with their depth, especially up front with Biddle only playing 5 games last year. But this is a team that I think has a chance to win this league. Trotter, what do you say to that?
I'm right there with you. This is a team I've continued to grow and grow and grow on. I would be all in on them if N'Faly Dante had been able to play one more year. But I think they're a little bit of a sleeping giant. With Dante not being on this roster, it's kind of, put a little smoke on them a little bit. I think they're going to sneak up on some people because KJ Evans coming back and Shellstad coming back is so enormous. I think last year in the class of 2023, we saw over a dozen of these top 60 freshmen hit the transfer portal. Oregon's retention just is so different compared to some of the others. So their ability to keep 5 stars is going to loom large. I think they're in for big year 2 jumps. And I love the depth in that backcourt. Raheem Moss and Keyshawn Barthélemy, getting those 2 guys to potentially buy into off the bench roles. Like Oregon's biggest issue the last few years has been injuries. I think they're built to withstand it this year. And I think they're a legit Big Ten title contender.
All right, I'm with you on that one. Illinois, Brad Underwood, talking about how he loves his offense this time of year and is really concerned about his defense. Says Kylan Boswell has lost 25 this summer. Obviously, Kasparis is a huge NBA prospect in the backcourt. We're talking about a 6'6" big guard who had 37 points in the U18 FIBA championship game. Trey White is there. Tomislav Ivicic is there. So he's saying in terms of sheer pros and talent, especially on the offensive end of the floor, this is the highest upside team he's had. But defensively, it's a real concern. Trotter, what do you make of this team in your home state?
Yeah, you talk to any NBA scout that's been to Illinois' practice, and they will tell you that this is the most talented roster in the Big Ten. I agree with them. I think this has the highest ceiling of any team in the Big Ten. They have pros everywhere. Trey White is a guy that has a little bit of a gem in the portal that they found that they believe that they can unlock him in a year 3 in a new program. But it's Kasparis Yakushonis, who is going to shape up to be one of the best playmakers in the country this year. Will Riley, another 5-star freshman. They love his scoring ability. Kylan Boswell, being able to get him back. Don't sleep on Tomi Ivicic either. They really love the floor stretching from him. He's been shooting the cover off the ball in practice. And the best part about this entire offensive build is they have 5 shooters. We've seen what Boston has been able to do in the playoffs. Illinois' roster is really built towards like that, where they want to have 5 guys on the floor who can pass, dribble, and shoot. The paint's going to be wide open for a lot of drives. And then you're going to have a ton of big-time shooters. Benham Rickhouse, know the name out of Evansville, a complete flamethrower with range out to well beyond 26, 27 feet. This group should be one of the best offenses in the sport.
That is why I'm higher on them, because as I go through the top teams in this league, I found myself going, ooh, I'm not sure about the shooting. Ooh, I'm not sure about the shooting. Ooh, I'm not sure about the shooting. You can say that about UCLA. You can say that about Indiana. You can say that to a certain extent about Rutgers and so many others. This team is going to make shots and they're going to score the ball. And if we look statistically how the models have kind of evolved in recent years, it used to be you can get away with being a mediocre offensive team if you get it done on the defensive end of the floor. Now you have to be elite on the offensive end. This group is going to be an excellent offensive team. And although Brad Underwood is saying he's not sure how good they're going to be defensively, I just have too much faith in him on that end of the floor to think they're not going to continue to improve over the course of the season.
No, it's a great point. Because here's the other thing too. I think offense wins championships right now. Like, I think that's the model that teams are going into. And I think that's the one-ish thing with Illinois. I think that their ceiling in a 40-minute game is as high as anybody in the league. I think they can win 4 or 5 games in a row in the NCAA tournament. I'm just more concerned about that long-term consistency over a 20-game sample size in a Big Ten that you have no nights off.
Yeah, that's fair. I think somebody's gonna lay 100 on them at some point this year, and you're gonna be like, well, that wasn't the night for us. Let's talk about Rutgers. Rutgers has 2 of the most notable freshmen in the country in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. I think Bailey is an elite long-term prospect. I've said he's got a chance to contend with Cooper Flagg for the #1 overall pick in the draft. Some people will compare him to Tracy McGrady. If you see him on the right night, you will think there's some validity there. Dylan Harper is as reliable of a freshman as there is in college basketball. We are talking about a 6'6" jumbo guard who obviously has terrific genes. He's grown up around the game. Dad played in the NBA. Older brother played at Rutgers. Mom has been his coach. So this entire existence is all about basketball, and he's just super seasoned, super polished. Trotter, my question to you is the supporting cast good enough to help these young guys in knowing that regardless of how good they are, they're still freshmen and they're going to have some growing pains? So what do we know about this everybody other than the freshmen on this team?
Yeah, I'm certainly concerned about the role players. I think there's some real questions if Jeremiah Williams can be impactful playing off the ball. The ball's going to be in Ace Bailey's hands and Dylan Harper's hands. Jeremiah Williams is going to have to find a way to impact winning in other ways. The 5 is a big spot as well. Steve Pikiell will tell you that Emmanuel Ogbole he has a lot of confidence in him. He really likes Zach Martini, the transfer out of Princeton. But I'm concerned about the 5 spot until proven otherwise. And then JaMychal Davis at point guard. What can we get from him as a shooter as well? So I think Rutgers has a very, very high ceiling if Harper and Bailey are completely awesome and making a ton of tough shots. But I don't think this group is going to be that great defensively. Like, I know Pikiell deserves a ton of credit for what he builds defensively. I would be hesitant if this group is one of his best units. If he gets this team in the top 25 defensively nationally, I think he should deserve Coach of the Year, because that would be really, really impressive.
Just throw a few more years on that contract. Just keep him going. Keep him going. Everybody loves Pikes. All right, let's talk Michigan. Dusty May arrives and does yeoman's work out of the portal, basically rebuilding that roster, including a very familiar name in Vladislav Golden, who's comes with him and really, I think he used the term institutional knowledge. He brings an understanding and ability to communicate with the other guys on the team about what exactly the coaching staff is looking for. But Trotter, what is it that you like most about this roster?
The passing. Trey Donaldson, great passer. Roddy Gale can pass it. Reuben Jones can pass it. Danny Wolf, the transfer out of Yale, can really pass it for a big man. Vlad Golden, I don't think he's Nikola Jokic-like, but he can pass it a little bit for a big man. I think all of that matters in this pace and space scheme where, honestly, Dusty May's system isn't super complicated. They're trying to get 2 to the basketball and they're trying to cut off ball. And I love that these guards will cut. We've seen Roddy Gale find a way to get into the middle of the floor. We've seen Reuben Jones be a really good cutter. And with all that passing should lead to a ton of space and a ton of really great looks. So I have some questions about them. Offensively, this is the only team in the Big Ten that doesn't have a guy in the starting lineup who made at least 53 pointers last year. But I think the quality of look that they're going to get and generate will minimize some of those shooting concerns. And then defensively, when Vlad Golden's on the floor, opponents shot just 51% at the rim against FAU a couple years ago. I think he's a Big Ten big who was playing in FAU. So I think that rim defense is going to be a legit thing for Michigan moving forward and gives them a really high floor under a coaching staff that I really, really trust.
No, see, that's exactly why I spent all day prepping. Like, where the heck did you find that? Like, no one in the starting lineup who made 53s. Like, where does that come from? It's rhetorical. I don't want to know. Because I don't want to have to look there next week. I will say this about the front court. I really like the way that the pieces fit. I think sometimes when you go to the portal, it's just talent acquisition mode and you pay no attention to roster construction like you should in terms of like, how does one player fit with another? I really like the front court. Golden gives him, yes, he's a big threat coming off ball screens, but he's also a post threat with Danny Wolf, Sam Walters, some of those other guys. You've got legit floor spacers who are going to open the lane, not just for Golden, but then when Golden comes out, you've got open lanes for dribble penetration. I think Roddy Gale could have not a breakout season. He was very good last year at Ohio State, but I think he can take the next step in his game, and the backcourt is potentially very good. So like what Dusty May did, and I agree, they're right there in the top 25 range. All right, we're going tier 3 now. And in Trotter's world, tier 3 means bubble teams. And we've got a slew of them. Trotter, we're going to try and be a little quicker. Remember, there's 18 teams in this league. And you've got, let's see, I don't know, what is that? Nine teams on the bubble. Ohio State, Maryland, Michigan State, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Northwestern, USC, and Penn State. So we're going to shoot for about a minute on each team. Let's start with Ohio State, where Jake Diebler is now the head coach. He took over on Valentine's Day of last year when they let his boss, Chris Holtmann, go. No one thought he had any chance to get the job full time, but he exceeded every expectation. And then he was able to not only retain Bruce Thornton, but do a lot of good work in the transfer portal, including Michi Johnson. Trotter, my question to you, is this the best backcourt in this conference?
Not quite, just because I'm giving Purdue the little bit of the edge, and Illinois potentially with their pros back there, but this is pretty close. This would be in that conversation. Bruce Thornton and Michi Johnson both can score at all 3 levels, but this is all about pace. Last year, Jake Diebler has a proof of concept that he kind of showcased. Ohio State's 5 highest tempo games happened to be when Jake Diebler took over as the interim head coach. He wants to play faster. He thinks that can get them better shots against unset defenses. And that's the name of the game for Ohio State this year. It's why they went into the portal for Aaron Bradshaw. It's why they went into the portal for Sean Stewart. It's why they went into the portal for Michi Johnson. Like, all of the moves make sense because of this. My one concern, I don't know if I fully love the wings. There's not a ton of wing creation. It's going to come down to if Bruce And if Michi Johnson can create a bunch of shots, and if Aaron Bradshaw's gravity is real as a stretch five.
Well, remember, Junie Mobley's gravity is very significant. We are talking about one of the best shooters in high school basketball last year. Let me shoot quickly on Bradshaw and Stewart. Those are two guys who were former five-star prospects who did not quite reach the level of production they expected in the blue blood first stops. Bradshaw, of course, at Kentucky, Stewart at Duke. Two guys, Stewart, very versatile defensively, super powerful, not really a shooter. You mentioned Bradshaw's ability to be a stretch five. This is the first time Aaron Bradshaw has been on a team that was not based around DJ Wagner since he was in middle school, I believe, maybe freshman year in high school. Every team he's been on, DJ Wagner has been the focal point. So I'm very interested to see what we'll get from him this season. He is an NBA caliber talent. There is no question about it. The consistency of his production and his motor is the thing that everybody wants to see. They will certainly be watching this year. Let's keep it moving to Maryland. I think this is a team that has got definite NCAA tournament aspirations and potential. My question is, again, with the collective shooting and floor spacing. Derek Queen, one of the best freshmen in the country this year, going to be, especially in the front court, he's going to be able to come in, make plays for himself and others. He's a high-volume rebounder. He's a terrific passer. Julian Reese is back, giving them one of the best big men in the country. But you put those two guys together and you have two non-shooters. Combine that with the wing who didn't shoot last year, and I'm just not sure where the spacing comes from. Trotter, what do you think?
No, it's a great point. That's why Chance Stevens, getting him healthy is going to be a huge key. But for me, it really comes down to Jacoby Gillespie, the transfer out of Belmont. All of his peripherals are phenomenal. He shot 70% at the rim last year, great in his catch and shoots, great from the mid-range. I don't know if that translates to the Big Ten. Maybe it does. And if it does, that's a complete game changer. And I think he's the straw that makes this really work. They're going to try to get him more off pin downs. I like the DHO game that they can get to with him and Derek Queen. And Julian Reese talked to him at Big Ten Media Days. He doesn't think you're going to be able to double any of those bigs just because they're just going to dominate you inside. And if you double them, they're able to get a quick pass inside to Derek Queen and vice versa. So we'll see if that happens. I think Maryland has the highest rim rate offensively of any team in the Big Ten. They have to dominate at the rim and dominate at the free throw line and get a ton more free throws than their opponents attempt in order to win, because I agree with you. Like, the shooting on this roster is a legit concern.
Let me just say this, though. As I repeat myself about the shooting concerns, I think that almost helps these guys. It makes me more worried about them in a non-conference situation because there's so many teams that have shooting and consequent floor spacing concerns. It makes you say, hey, if the game is going to be just a bloodbath inside, a lot of these teams are built for it. So I think Maryland will benefit from playing in a league where a lot of people have the same problems they do. All right, let's keep it moving. Tom Izzo in Michigan State. Trotter says they're on the bubble. Trotter says Tom Izzo may not get back to the NCAA tournament. Trotter, tell me why.
Very young team with a lot of new faces trying to step into roles that they haven't been used to. Jaden Akins, we're going to see him as a primary lead ball handler. His usage rate has been in that 18% range for a while. Jeremy Fears, after after last year where he missed almost all of his freshman year after getting shot in a really unfortunate situation, now he's coming back. Xavier Booker, you're stepping into a really big role. So those three guys are the keys. Frankie Fiddler getting him in from Nebraska, Omaha. I love his tough shot making. I'm a little concerned about if it will translate to the Big Ten, because if you look at his tape, it is a lot of tough twos, but his ability to get to the free throw line and add some spacing, a little bit similar to what Joey Hauser did, is certainly going to help. I don't think the five is going to be a group of strength for this Michigan State team. It really comes down to just how good these guards are. And if these young guys stepping into new roles, this is a big bet from Tom Izzo on retention. It's time for them to pay it back to him.
One other guy who they retained is Cohen Carr. I think he's got a chance to crack this starting lineup as well. Kind of an undersized four-man, but he's powerful and one of the most explosive athletes in the country. The lefty, talked to an NBA scout the other day who said he made 3 threes in the practice he watched. I'm just telling you right now, if Cohen Carr starts making threes, it's a totally different calculus for him as a long-term prospect and for what it means for this Michigan State team, something to keep an eye on. Iowa, where Fran McCaffrey says this is his deepest team since arriving in the program. And I will also say that I think Peyton Sandford is one of the best players in this league, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. Now, listen, I was in Chicago as you were for the NBA Draft Combine. He did not play well there, but had it been a different outcome, this is someone who could have very easily played his way into the NBA last year. We were talking about a jumbo wing at about 6'7", 6'8", and a big-time shot maker. What we've seen over the years at Iowa is guys who come back see an escalation of their role. Both of the Murray twins had that, and I think Peyton Sandford is on store for that as well. Trotter, McCaffrey says he likes his depth. How do you feel about the pieces that are around Peyton Sandford?
I love the other two guys. I think Josh Dix is an awesome player. I think he's going to be, a nightmare, especially from that mid-range. Owen Freeman is awesome at the rim, and Sanford's awesome from three. So it's like you have all three of those guys at all three levels. Offensively, I have no questions. Keep an eye on Drew Thelwell, the transfer out of Morehead State. Really well-coached kid. They're really high on him and his ability to potentially come in. I think in him spelling the load a little bit with Brock Harding should make his transition as a sophomore a little bit easier. And they like the depth that they've accumulated in that front court. I'm a little bit hesitant to fully buy in on the Iowa's going to play defense this year narrative that's kind of floating around. But Seydou Traore, the transfer out of Manhattan, big time athlete, he gives them a little bit more pop that they certainly need. But again, this group will go as far as the big three take them. Can Owen Freeman be better defensively? Can Peyton Sandford give you a little bit more off the bounce? And can Josh Dix elevate his game? If those three things happen, Iowa's going to finish a lot higher than the bubble.
Fred Hoiberg in Nebraska, not many people are projecting them to be back in the NCAA tournament, but as he showed last year, there's a price to be paid when you sleep on the Big Red. This was a team that particularly at home was absolutely lethal. They can space you from basically every position on the floor, and that includes the 5 spot. Just a very potent shooting team last year, and I thought they won games with offense. I will say it again. This is a little bit of a contrarian path in the Big Ten because a lot of teams are built with size and defense, but I think Nebraska is just going to have some nights where they can outscore you. Trotter, what do we think about that?
It's a great point. I think losing Keisei Tominaga is obviously huge, but I think losing Rink Mast to a knee injury for the whole year is actually a bigger blow. They don't really have a proven big on this roster that's comfortable as a playmaker like Mast was. We'll see who steps into that. Maybe it's Berke Bayunktensel, the transfer out of UCLA. That was kind of his appeal when he was coming over. If he can find that, that would be huge. But this team will go as far as its 2 wings take him. Juwan Gary is an awesome defender who's going to give a run for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He's going to give Kobe Johnson that run. And then Bryce Williams. I've talked about it all the time. 9 All-Americans last year were year 2 transfer breakouts. Bryce Williams, the transfer out of Charlotte, year 2 in Nebraska system. He was really good last year. I think he elevates into a different tier, and they got to have Connor Essegian be a better player than what he was last year. And that off movement shooting that he brings to the table is a little bit similar to what Keisei Tominaga could do. And if he can replicate that role, you could talk yourself into Nebraska finishing a lot higher than 12th or 13th in the Big Ten.
Northwestern without Boo Buie, I think, is just a beginning of a totally new generation. Chris Collins has done an amazing job with this program, but Boo Buie has been absolutely instrumental. Is there a path to them getting back in the tournament mix this year?
There's certainly a path. Part of that is Brooks Barnheiser being the best player on this team and really elevating into a no-doubt pro, especially as a two-way guy. Ty Berry getting him healthy is big. Nick Martinelli had some moments. Matt Nicholson, the journalism Dikembe Mutombo. If you can have a fully healthy season from him, we've seen what he can do defensively, protecting the rim. Keep an eye on their young guys, though. KJ Wyndham, I've heard a ton of great buzz out of him so far in the preseason. Just a junkyard dog who is always in the gym, a complete gym rat. Keep an eye on that lefty. If he shoots it at a high level, that improves their depth. But life with Boo Buie is not easy. I have a point guard that I love to play pickup basketball with. All my shots are so much easier when he's there. When he's gone, I have to take way tougher shots, and somehow I don't make my threes anymore.
I don't know what to say to that. USC, Eric Musselman. I think this is a perfect fit. There's nobody who understands marketing more than Muss. I really like St. Thomas. I really like Desmond Claude. Not as sure about the front court here. Josh Cohen have questions about his ability to impact the Big Ten after being at UMass and before that St. Francis, PA. What do you think of this squad?
Great positional size, 1 through 4. They start 6'6" through 6'7" at 4 different spots on the perimeter. I think that will show up defensively. St. Thomas has to be a pro, though. I like Desmond Claude, but I think St. Thomas might have a little bit of a higher ceiling if he can put it all together. He can pass it, he can dribble it, he can shoot it from multiple levels. Like, you can see the little pieces there. If he is that guy, I think we can have a different conversation about USC. And Desmond Claude, we've seen it in practice. If he makes threes, he is an NBA player. Eric Musselman will tell you that. Desmond Claude will tell you that. He has to answer that question this year. Those two guys have to be legit studs, because I do have some questions about the supporting cast, even though I like Chibuzo Agbo, the transfer out of Boise State. Terrific 3-and-D veteran.
Penn State has one of the most reliable two-way guards in college basketball in Ace Baldwin. But after that, there's a lot of questions. I think that Freddie DeLeon, the Tennessee transfer, who never lived up to the hype under Rick Barnes, he's a key player this year. I think DeMarco Dunn is a key player this year, especially if Mike Rhodes can get him to buy into the defensive end of the floor. But I just have a hard time believing any Mike Rhodes team is going to finish in the bottom third of this conference. What do they have to do to be better than this spot, though, Trotter?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for that next Hunter Salas, the former Ballyhoo recruit who kind of loses his way at stop 1 and then finds it at stop 2, I think DeLeon really checks off that box. And that backcourt combination of Baldwin, who's like a 6-foot cockroach on the ball, and DeLeon, who's 6'5" and super long and athletic, like that's fun. Like that 1-2 punch is going to be really fun. DeMarco Dunn, getting him back, I think is huge as well. And defensively, there's some stuff there with Nick Kern as well. I like him defensively, but it really comes down to these bigs. You have to have serviceable big man play in the Big Ten to survive. Keep an eye on Yannick Niederhauser, the transfer out of Northern Illinois. They think that they found a gem here as a potential Moneyball addition for them. He had a really high block rate and limited minutes. They think expanded minutes are on the way and Penn State will be improved. I'm not sure I totally buy it, but you can kind of talk yourself into it if Baldwin is a Big Ten Player of the Year contender and DeLeon really makes that Hunter Salas type surge.
Tier 4 in the Big Ten. It's going to begin. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I skipped one. Wisconsin, Trotter. I didn't mean to disrespect Wisconsin. Tell me about them.
The one question is their portal class. You know, they really got ravaged. Losing a guy like AJ Storr in the portal really stings, and then losing Chucky Hepburn stings. And the early returns on their portal class hasn't been super attractive. Cam Hunter, John Tanjay, and Xavier Amos are not all expected to be in the starting lineup. So this group will really need Max Klesmit to continue to be one of the best 3-and-D guards in the Big Ten. And keep an eye on John Blackwell. They love this kid. They think he might actually be their number 1 option this year. And then you kind of know what you have in that front court with Stephen Crowell, who's just been around for such a long time, and Nolan Winters, a potential sophomore breakout candidate, a 6'11" guy who can shoot it. But John Blackwell's the guy. He was a kind of a reserve player last year. Could this be a Johnny Davis type of year 2 jump where he goes from a role player to a star from year 1 to year 2? Wisconsin might need it to make the tournament.
Tier 4, deemed. Now we can do Tier 4. Deemed the basement by Trotter, so he's not going to talk about him for long. Washington Huskies, first year under Danny Sprinkle. I think it's just about establishing the culture. Trotter, what can we expect in year 1 outside of the great Azabor?
A lot of questions about this backcourt. I think DJ Davis, the transfer out of Butler, is going to shoot a much better percentage last year. He had to take a lot of grenades at Butler. I think they're going to get him a little bit more high quality looks. And if they can get Frank Kepnang healthy, that's huge. He's one of the best rim protectors in the league and can really run. So I'm buying Danny Sprinkle as a coach. I have a lot of questions about this roster, though. Tyler Harris, can he potentially be a guy? Makai Mason, can he be a guy? Lewis Cartwright, can he be a guy? Zoom Diallo? Like, they have a lot of names, not a lot of proven high major studs outside of, a couple little pieces. So the lack of depth is a real concern in the Big Ten, where you literally are going to play a quality team every single night.
Minnesota has a player in Dawson Garcia who is widely believed to be one of the very best in the conference. I expect he will get a ton of usage this year. But after that, there's a lot of question marks. To me, this is a program, I'm just going to say it plainly, that needs a more significant NIL commitment to really compete in this conference. You got to give Ben Johnson a chance to be successful, and we'll see if they've got enough firepower. So I will pose that as a question. Do they have enough firepower outside of Dawson Garcia up front?
Yeah, it stinks because they've had really good players in that program that have transferred out. Pharrell Payne is certainly one of the biggest ones that they lost in the portal. But this is the oldest team in the Big Ten. Older teams tend to outplay preseason projections. Again, having them last isn't necessarily a slight. I still think this is a top 75 team in the country. But it's going to be a tough challenge. One guy I'd keep an eye on is freshman Isaac Asuma. He comes from small town Minnesota, but he can really shoot it. I saw him as a freshman, and I was like, oh, that guy's different. And he's turned himself into a top 100 type of recruit. He is going to be a guy that if he follows that Cam Christie models, maybe a little bit farther down the recruiting rankings, but has a great opportunity in a program that will give him minutes, he has a chance to really succeed in this backcourt that's pretty wide open.
All right, everybody, that is it for the Big Ten. You can find all the other season previews here on the 24/7 Sports channel. And, of course, you keep it locked on 247sports.com, where we've got wall-to-wall coverage all the time. And coming up at the top of the hour, Braylon Mullins, the prospect who I think is the best shooter in high school basketball, announces his commitment right here on the 24/7 Sports channel. Don't go anywhere.